Have you remembered yet?
Emily, look, Emily, that's Emily is Emily's coming in a bit. She's got loads of customer emails right now, so she
No
can't
worries.
join about halfway through.
No worries. Okay. All right. And I guess the same with Victoria, Neil. She
Well, Victoria's got a few days off work.
okay.
I haven't spoken because I was off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I've not actually had a chance to catch up with her, so I'm not sure
That's
whether
right.
she will be here earlier. If I'm being blunt.
No worries at all. Right. Well, we're live on LinkedIn, so she can always watch the replay if she wants. Hi,
Yeah,
Danny.
indeed.
Danny, have you swapped sessions? Is that right? Were you always on Monday? Sorry,
Monday.
my confusion. Okay. All right. Any questions before we get going?
No, I don't think so.
All right. So today we're going to be talking. We're going to sort of dig into websites. We're going to talk about marketing websites specifically, how to plan them, how to design them, how to understand how to get value out of them really from a marketing perspective. And similar format, I'll sort of introduce some concepts and then we'll drop into a conversation and hopefully learn a bit from each other. So let me share my screen and we'll get going. Okay, so part 2, websites of content. So just for those of you interested, I'll just talk really briefly about the technical architecture. So like the software that underpins a website. So there's this concept, most websites, web software systems and or websites fit into this concept called the 3-tiered architecture. It's pretty baked in now to the way a lot of web-based software gets developed. And it talks about the 3 different layers. So right at the top, you've got the so-called presentation layer. And that's, it's HTML code, it's JavaScript code, it's CSS code. And this is the stuff that runs inside your browser screen. So Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, whatever it is. This runs, locally on your own system. Now, through the internet, depending on how that front end code is written, you might be pressing buttons and pressing enter on things and pressing the next button or the back button or the forward button. It will communicate through the internet to the website server, and that server is going to host normally two types of software code. First of all, it will have the application layer. So this is the programming language that's going to underpin the intelligence of what's going on. Now, for most marketing websites, that's going to mean it's the content management system. So the content management system has to be programmed in a way so that it pulls the right bits of content and then pushes them back up the internet so they're presented and they look like the way they're supposed to look. And then right at the bottom is the database layer. So this is, if it's just a marketing website with just marketing content, it's still got a database. It's a database of content and images and and video, and it's just organized as a database, and it's up to the application layer to pull out the relevant bits of content and present them correctly. If you're running an e-commerce website or something like that, then the database is going to be larger, more sophisticated, and the application layer will be equally larger, more sophisticated. The idea of separating these things was a number of reasons, really. First of all, you just be more efficient with the way that you program website systems. So theoretically, if you've got an e-commerce website with a database, you can keep the database as is and recreate a new presentation layer and a new application layer, which makes things like website refreshes or redesigns, easier and more flexible. So that's about all I'll say on the technology. But obviously, when we get into the discussion bit, then feel free to throw any more questions at me. Let's talk now about the content structure of websites, because typically as marketers, this is the area where we'll have much more control of. Just out of interest, I won't normally just ask you to shout, but just either hands up or shout out if you've heard of this concept of hub hero hygiene. one, no, and a couple of no's. Okay, so this is sort of been developed, relatively recently. It's been around, I don't know, 5 years or so, and it's a way of talking about digital content in the broader sense, really. So you can be talking about digital marketing content that can go on any channel, but you can also talk about it as content that goes, specifically on a website. So I'll talk generally on this slide. So in general, hero content is sort of typically, big budget, big bang type content that's designed to generate a lot of awareness. So it sort of fits with that top of the funnel thing that we were talking about last week. So typically this would be big brand awareness campaigns. In the broader sense, you might talk about TV, a TV advert, for example. You might be talking about, a showcase page on a website that's got, showcase video content or very highly developed case studies or something like that. Hub content is the sort of regular push content. Is that episodic content that we create to maintain touch points with our audiences. And probably the best way to think about hub content is the blog content. So blogs are a really good example of what hub content is all about. And then hygiene content is in the context of the websites, it would be like the inquiry form. It's an e-commerce checkout form, or the service page for a B2B business. The contact us page. These are kind of bottom, like the utility bits of content. Okay, let's just flesh it out with some examples. So if we look at Hertz, the car hire company. So the hygiene content in the context of their website would be the inquiry page, or this is essentially going to pull out some options and some prices for us. And this is a utility. It's an inquiry form, and it's clearly a very, very important form, and it serves a very specific function. So the idea with hygiene content, it's about getting the user to do one particular thing. In this case, it's an inquiry form. Enter your details and press the search button. If it's a service page on a B2B business, this B2B business website that's looking to generate inquiries, or an education website that's looking to generate applications, for example, it would be, look at the course page or the service offering page and press the inquiry button, or click through to the inquiry page. So one specific purpose and some specific information that it's trying to provide. And then, so we mentioned hub content might be a blog article. So in this case, Hertz, like many companies, will create a lot of blog content, and the idea of blog content is that it will support certain pillars that will underpin certain messages that you want to get out to certain audiences. So there will be a subset of Hertz customers, that really want to be driving, in a green friendly manner. So a certain amount of their content is going to be dedicated to that particular audience. And in this case, there's a blog article talking about tips to help you drive in a more green friendly manner, environmentally friendly manner. And the important thing with this type of content is you want to link it to if possible, and hopefully it will be, link it to a relevant hygiene page. So every blog article, and you're probably familiar with, if not with your own blogs, with other ones you've read, you'll see they'll hyperlink to certain pages. Sometimes they'll hyperlink off to reference other information elsewhere. But really, a good blog article should also hyperlink to one or more hygiene pages within the same website, because a part of the purpose of this hub content is to engage users with messages and content, obviously, that's interesting to them, but also give them the opportunity to go and check out your hygiene content, which typically is going to be our products or services. So that's an example of hub content. On the same website, they've created a campaign that's all about how to have the most amazing American road trip. So they've researched places to stay, they've researched places to eat, they've researched places of interest, and they essentially created a whole campaign, around discovering the US with, on road, and obviously that's the hook there. It's a car hire company. And they've pulled all of this content together and created essentially a microsite, dedicated area of their site where you can go in and access all of this information and design your own trip. So the idea there is that's going to be very widely appealing to anyone in the world, potentially, obviously outside of COVID times, who would be interested in going to the US and making it a road trip holiday. So that's, and obviously hero content, you can go in any direction with it. It doesn't need to be exactly like this, but this is an example. Okay, let's talk about landing pages. So when we landing pages, before we look at this, it can be quite it's quite a generic term sometimes. So let's just define it first of all. So for those of you who are working with the Mint Twist on, for example, paid advertising campaigns, Facebook advertising, Google advertising, or any agency, typically when you set up a campaign, you would have an associated landing page. And so landing pages for advertising campaigns, is very clear. But to a certain extent, you can also think about your specific service pages and product pages as landing pages. If they're optimized for SEO, there would be landing pages for SEO. So to maybe draw out an example of that. So if someone typed film school London and Met Film were optimized from an SEO perspective, you would probably want that user to be optimized. Sorry, that search term you would want to be optimized so that it will go to the homepage, because that's the generic term, one of the generic terms that Met Film would be after. But if you typed in something very, very specific, so for example, post-production courses in, post-production courses, in London, you would, if you're Met Film and you've got your SEO sorted, you would want a phrase like that to drop right into your post-production course page. So it's not a landing page in the sense that it's only been designed for an ad campaign, but we would want it to act like a landing page. So many hygiene pages or hygiene content types, we want them to some extent to act like a landing page, because if someone's typing in something so specific like that, it implies that they're nearly ready to make that purchase. They're certainly in the consideration phase, referencing what we were talking about last week. And so we would want them to go straight to the page that's most interesting to them. We don't necessarily want to send to the homepage because they already know what they're looking for. So landing page can be anything from very specific, built for an ad campaign, to hygiene pages themselves. Okay, so when we talk about a landing page that's built for an ad campaign, these are the sorts of rules that are really important for that we need to think about when we want to structure a page like this. And so when we say rules, obviously they're not hard and fast. This is ways that you can maximize the number of people who, having landed on the landing page, will then take the action that we want them to take. So if we're running an ad campaign that's sending 100 people to this landing page, and we get our audience targeting right, we get the messaging right, so we get 100 people to actually click on the ad, then we now want to maximize the number of people who, in the case of this diagram, click the orange click here button, because that's what we're trying to get them to do. And the way that we do that is we want a nice looking headline, not just nice, but ideally it would also be related to whatever message it was that sent the user here in the first place. If we're talking about an ad, we would want that headline to relate to the source ad. Obviously, a secondary headline that's going to reinforce what the offer is here, because we're probably offering something. And then obviously number 3 is the description should build out that. Testimonials are a good way of reinforcing confidence to a user. So either a testimonial or some equivalent sort of third-party approval of what we're offering here. And then when we talk about the do it now and the click here button, the button and the message, we, in the marketing terms, we call this a CTA. So this is the call to action. And this is actually the primary objective of this page, is the conversion action. It's the goal that we want the user to take. Landing pages, you might not always have the same links as you would do typical page, because once we've got a user on a landing page, we typically want to keep them there. We want them to take the action. We don't really want them to click out. Number 8 is obviously the image. We want to reinforce whatever the key message is using imagery. And number 9 is referencing what's called the fold line. So this is where when we design a website, if you design a website website pages in HTML5, you can design for exactly where the fold is, regardless of the size of the screen that the end user is using. You can design for where that fold is. And obviously, if we're talking about designing a landing page, and we've said that all of these 8 things are important, we want them to all be above the fold line, so the user doesn't have to scroll down to sort of get to them. Okay, so we'll drop into a bit of discussion now. So look, this question is just an opener, so please feel free to, instead of answering this question, just ask a question back, or make a comment or make an observation yourself. But the kickoff question here, I guess, is how is content managed in your organization, and or what types do you create? Obviously worked with many hundreds of organizations, and I see a wide variety. Some people are doing everything house, some people are doing nothing, some people are doing in between. To be interested to hear your thoughts. Shall we come to Sandra first, please?
Oh, hi again, everyone. Yeah, in terms of the content that we create and how we manage that for Fin Partners, obviously being kind of a PR agency, we do it best for our clients. I think it's like one of those well-kept secrets that agencies often might not be as focused on creating their own content, and I think we're like actively trying to not be one of those agencies. And I think the main focus for us is really a mix of content that we kind of create and that we manage, obviously across the different regions, across the different practices, that adds a certain amount of complexity. But if we're looking at the more kind of B2B part of the agency, for example, if we're kind of thinking in the hero hub and hygiene concept, we might create hero content that's based on research. So for example, looking at which content, for example, works best in the B2B world. So we'd be doing some independent research and create a white paper based on that. And in order to promote that, obviously put that out on social media, for example, but then tie that to kind of more hub content, such as blog posts on the topic, kind of outlining these are 5 ways that you could improve your content to target B2B decision makers, for example. And then the hygiene content around that would be, for example, just get in touch with us if you want us to support on, making your content stand out more, things like that. And I guess, that would be kind of done in different formats. Usually I reckon for us, it would be written content, because that's kind of what we do best. But obviously, like seeing like what works best for clients, like video is obviously one of the great ways to put it out there. So that obviously would kind of add another layer of complexity to get kind of that out there and get that all approved. But yeah, I think just getting that mix right as well and kind of driving the traffic there is quite important.
I think, thanks, Sandra. That's a really, especially the example about the research piece is really good for some organizations. You can invest in a sort of research project that can be really, really useful to your clients. I'm guessing it might be the sort of thing that Client Farmer and Neil do, but the great thing about doing that, it's not just one bit of content. You're going to spin off loads of stuff. You've got the key white paper, as you said, but you've probably got the opportunity to have lots of blog articles or hub content.
Repurpose it and then kind of, focus on that and just kind of make sure that the research, that obviously is quite time intensive. kind of that we leverage that as much as we can across the different regions, right? So if we were to look at, let's say, the US, the UK, DACH, and maybe like China, that could also then kind of play into it. So that could also be quite nice.
Yeah, no, that's right. So hub content is, you know, classically it's expensive in terms of either in terms of cost or investment in time or both. So, but yeah, once you do it, you can get a lot more from it. Should we come to Neil next? I've talked about you.
Yeah, I mean, content is one of the hot topics for us, Elliot. So, I mean, it's one of the things that Victoria and I took away from last week's seminar, that we've not been particularly great with our content. It's kind of been piggybacking again on the rest of the industry and what the industry's doing and making our comments around that. And so we're going to be actively going away from that and creating our own. And as you say, we've had a little bit of a meeting on it already. One of the big things is not necessarily the monetary cost, but certainly time cost is massive, absolutely massive to us, because we're going to be starting from scratch. So content is extremely important to us. And then obviously once we've got that, we've decided what that looks like, whether that's we're talking about doing videos and having somebody talking about that on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, like almost like a vlog, which obviously has its own downfalls really from a time perspective, and making sure it's relevant, because all the pharma companies in the world are all working on different things, but there is this very niche part of it which they'll all be working on, but it's only a small part. So yeah, it's going to be difficult for us, but it's top of our agenda to make sure our content is bespoke to us and not piggybacking on the rest of the industry.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart approach, Neil. What I would say, just I think probably you already know, but with the content thing, if you are starting from a point where you don't have a large batch or you don't have stuff that you're necessarily that happy with, don't feel that you need to immediately have a big backlog. Users won't really, in truth, but user behavior, they're unlikely to, in large numbers at least, to go back and start checking your back catalog. My advice would definitely be just create a schedule that you can actually keep up with and make it that episodic, so each episode comes once a week, whatever's viable, once a month. I mean, it's better to have have less content consistently dripping into your funnel than have a big rush and then have gaps and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we're going to be focusing on is, again, with our database of clients, is when we do a vlog or whatever content is going to be then released, is have that little mini marketing campaign around that. So then it then hits into the landing page and immediately gets onto it. And it was very interesting there that you highlighted obviously the 9 areas that a landing page should have. So that's something I think we've got to take away from tonight already. Is just to make sure we focus on all those 9 areas.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Neil. Lucy?
Oh, hi, Elliot. So I mean that we're in quite a lucky situation, really. We've literally just relaunched our new website. So as far as the content's concerned, we're pretty much there with it. I've had some input in it, but it's mainly another lady who works in marketing who kind of put it all together. One thing that was really interesting for me was the hub aspect of it. So for us, I think it would mainly be our case studies. So, and this is scenarios of clients that have used us and we've had good results with. So we have a few pages dedicated to our case studies. But one thing I noticed, and one thing that you mentioned, sorry, was that there needs to be a link to a contact us page within those. And one thing I've noticed instantly is that we don't have that. So we have the case studies and we have the sign up, but we don't have talk to us or request a demo link in those. So that's really interesting. And that's something that I can kind of have a look and see whether we can get that built in.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad, Lucy. It's really, really normal for, you know, when I sort of have this part of the course for people to sort of just go and critically look at their pages. But the beauty of it is very often adding a call to action above the folds to a page that's missing it. It's normally quite an easy and quick thing to do. And actually it's a quick win as well, particularly if it's a popular page.
Yeah, that's right. And I'd imagine that they would be quite popular, to be honest, because particularly with what we do, organisations want to see that it's worked with other organisations. So I'd imagine that this is probably quite a click-through page. So that's been really helpful. Thank you.
Good. No, cool. Daisy? You're on mute, Daisy.
I do this every time. We've been simply constantly updating and improving our recipe, our website, and we've recently made a recipe page to get people to engage with content about making various different hot chocolates at home using different recipes and stuff. We have an email newsletter that we create content with weekly, that we put in news, sales stuff to increase brand awareness and expand the customer base, kind of thing. And yeah, on our social media, we've got an app where we've got a news section, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Wonderful, thanks. And I believe there's someone on this call who was an end user of your website this week. Do you want to tell us about that, Sandra?
Yeah, I have to admit that I kind of looked you guys up, and I did actually order some hot chocolate. And I think,
oh, did you?
Yeah. So just waiting for that to arrive, and you know, I'll let you know what I thought next time.
Give us some feedback. Yeah.
But yeah, it works.
Good.
So the website works. There you go. Danny, should we come to?
Yeah, we do a lot of news and blog content on the website, so much so that my Monday morning is always spent at an editorial meeting where we're with the leadership. We discuss news stories, and everyone's just kind of transparent about what they've heard about and any particular leads. And we're really always keen to have a strong variety, as we just said before. So there'll be some blog content that's a little bit more on the hard sell, that will be like reinforcing our USPs. But then we'll also have things like kind of key takeaways and roundups of industry masterclasses that we've had. And then we also have things like interviews with our graduates and our students about their own filmmaking careers. Trying to think of other types of content that's really effective for us. But sometimes we're being aware of the calendar. So, I mean, just the end of last week, we did a kind of 10 films to watch on Valentine's Day. And that content isn't really particularly to do with us, but it's just being aware of the calendar and piggybacking onto that. And that stuff really like gets a lot of engagement. We share all of that on our social media a lot. We push it there. We also do weekly emails for that. We work with an external PR person as well. So sometimes we're assessing with certain news content whether we want to be kind of sharing that also out to local press or other sort of industry relevant press. And we're really mindful about the connecting back, as we said, to other pages of the website. So we're strong on hyperlinking back to tutor pages and to course pages. All of our blogs and news articles always end with some sort of call to action, probably requesting a prospectus, or if we're coming up to an application deadline, something about applying as well. So yeah, we do a lot of news.
Yeah. No, that's really good to hear. I mean, it's like it does. I know that you guys, I knew you were progressive anyway, but based on what you're saying, it sounds like you're certainly one of the most progressive organizations that we've come across in terms of what you're doing. So it's really good to hear. It's interesting just hearing you talk, Danny, because you just made me think that I should probably say that a lot of things in marketing, a lot of terms in marketing sort of get used and then they get developed. So the Hero Hub hygiene thing, you can even, a lot of YouTubers or a lot of channels, that YouTube channels, you know, in brands or individuals will refer to those concepts along their videos, and they'll say the hero video is some sort of video where they'll go and interview, you know, I don't know, a famous celebrity, for example, and they'll put a lot of investment into that hero video, and there might be 1 or 2 a year. The hub video, that would be, this is the push, this is the videos that we consistently make for our audiences. And then the hygiene videos in the YouTube world, they would refer to that, those are the sales videos. And we would have, maybe, or they would have 1 of those a month. So the hub content comes every single week or twice a week. Hero comes a couple of times a year, and then the selling video or the hygiene video might be once a month. And it sounds like you might be taking a similar approach to your blog content as a single unit. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I think there has to be a variety. If not, if you can't have too much of one singular thing, because you'd be shooting yourself in the foot. What was I going to say? You spurred a thought when you were mentioning that as well. But I don't know, it wasn't related exactly to what you were saying, but also just maximizing any content you have. So if you might have, back to the example of a masterclass, you might have an industry guest, you might make a video of that, and we're linking back to the blog content when we're posting that on YouTube, but it also works vice versa. It's embedding that video content into the news piece, the blog itself as well, which I think really works for us.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think Sandra's mentioned the word repurposing already today, and it's the repurposing of content is a it's a powerful thing to do, but it maximizes your ability to leverage that time investment. Neil's right; it takes a lot of time to create content. So if you created the blog article, why not take a bit of extra time to repurpose it so it can be used for social media posts or or used in other areas. So great point. Anyone else want to make a point before we move on? Okay, let's go back to screen share. Incidentally, I just feel like I have to give you guys this advice, because this is something that Mint Twist are looking at the moment. There's a system called Lumen 5. It's a way of, just bring it up here. You could connect your blog articles to this system. If you feed in a blog article, it will literally draw down all of the text and all of the video, and it will, using a whole bunch of catalog video, potentially open source stuff, it will allow you to create a video version of the blog article. And I'm trying to build out Mint Twist's own marketing processes so that every blog article we create, because we invest quite a lot of time in our blog articles and they're good, I'm trying to make an equivalent Lumen 5 video that we can push through some of the social media channels. Has anyone used Lumen 5 or experienced it? Danny, have you used it?
No.
Yeah, I would say it's worth a look. Particularly if you're creating blog articles and you want quite an efficient way of turning them into little videos. Okay, thank you for that nice bit of good chat. Let's move on to the website planning process. So, I think Lucy's, by the sound of it, has just been through this process. Neil and Clement Farmer just at the start of the process, and so some of the others may or may not have been through it. But let's have a quick sort of chat about how it works. So, and obviously this is from a marketer's perspective. We'll look at it from that perspective. So when we're putting together a brief for a new website or even a website refresh or redesign, these 4 questions are really useful to ask ourselves. So, first of all, obviously, what do we want to say? What are the key messages that we want to get across? Who do we want to say it to? So these are the audience groups that we're speaking to. How do we want them to perceive us? So the idea of website design is not only we're getting a message to a person, but there's also how do we want them to feel about us, to a certain extent. And obviously using design, we can sort of convey feelings as well as objective messages. But then I suppose the pragmatic thing to consider when we're talking about a marketing website particularly is what do we want them to do as a result of visiting. Now, obviously, what do we want them to do depends on what points they are in that funnel that we were talking about, in that buying journey with us. It depends probably on what audience group we're talking about, and if we've got different offerings, it might depend on what offering we're talking about. But in general, so there's not just one thing we want people to do. There will be a number of things, but these are the 4 key questions. And if you ever find yourself, writing a website brief for a website designer, developer, agency, whoever it is, writing down the answers to these 4 questions will take you a long way towards starting off a good brief. There's a number of phases of building out a website, and some of them are sort of quite technical and all about programming and stuff. But the phases that as marketeers we definitely want to sort of be involved in are the planning and design phases. So the design brief, really, however you write the design brief, it should cover those things we mentioned. So the audience groups, what we want to say to them, and the action is what we want them to do. And broadly speaking, look, if it's an e-commerce website, the primary action is buy something. If it's a higher education website, the primary action is apply now. If it's a B2B website, the primary action is inquire now. So for Lucy and Neil, it would be generating inquiries. And then there will be other sort of micro actions, lower level actions: sign up for a newsletter, download my white paper, fill out the calculator form, whatever else. And but let's talk about the design phase now. So let me just go back there. So once we've created our design brief, there's just really broadly sort of 3 key steps to the design phase of a website. And the first step is we just want a sitemap. The great thing about sitemaps, it lets us logically organize our content types. So we've just been talking about content types. If we've got 4 different services, there's going to be 4 different pages covering 4 different services, and they're going to be logically related in terms of their objective, in terms of the action that we want users to take on those particular pages. If we've got an area of blog articles, similarly, there's going to be some shared objectives. Those blog articles are about underpinning topics that are going to be relevant to our audience and underpin our message, but they're also going to consistently link back to the relevant pieces of hygiene content in the way that Danny sort of described. And obviously there's other areas of the site, but if we've got a clear idea of how our site is going to be structured, it allows us to start to think about how the user can take that journey through that site, so they're getting the right access to the right bits of information at the right time, depending on who they are and where they are at that point in their own personal buying journey, hopefully with us. Step 2 is kind of the idea of wireframe. So the idea here is to take the key pages and you just lay them out in terms of the types of information that you want on the page. So this is in advance, obviously, of putting the actual creative design on these wireframes. And the main reason for doing this is so that you, particularly in terms of the hygiene pages, so those sort of rules that we were talking about, landing pages, some of them are going to be relevant in some of our pages. So we want to make sure that our content is organized in the right way, so that each individual page, which theoretically should have each individual objective or goal, is designed in a way that before you start putting the creative on top of it, it's actually serving that primary objective. So just on a really basic level, if we're laying out a page, we want to make sure that the key call to action is above, the fold line. I was speaking with some clients that just about to come on board with me just the other day. We looked at their it was a B2B website. Primary page is sign up for an ebook. Two primary call to actions are sign up for an ebook, sign up for a webinar. Those were the 2 primary objectives, apart from make an inquiry. And both of those pages had all the right information on them, but the call to action was right at the bottom, below the fold line. So the number of users that actually make it to that point is reduced and it just won't be effective as if you still have all the information, but the call to action is above the fold line. So you just make sure the page is laid out correctly, and then step 3, then you put the design on top of those wireframes. And so this, if you follow this process, you just give yourself the best chance of not only having a good looking website, but one that works essentially. So I just spoke very briefly through this first phase of the process, the planning and design phase. And like I said, typically as a marketing person, you would want to be involved here. Now, if you've run this phase quite well, once you've got, a sitemap signed off, the key pages, how they're going to be organized. We've also got the key pages designed. If you've done that correctly, then when it goes into a build phase, which typically is a lot of programming work. So from a marketer's perspective, we're not going to be particularly involved here, but we hope that what comes out of the build phase, because of the way that we planned and designed the project, will be a website that's very, very close to perfect, and then we can reduce the number of changes that we need to make. In a minute, I'm going to ask about people's experience of building websites, but from a lot of marketers, from their perspective, the process can be sometimes, at best difficult and at worst, horrendous. And in many cases, it's because the communication between the marketers and the programmers is just going back and forward, which just elasticates this front end of the process. But look, if you do it quite well, you come out with something that's nearly right. Invariably you're going to make some changes, but at this stage, you should have a website that's got the key pages designed, and it just needs, the content to be finalized. And as marketeers, we would definitely want to manage that part of the process, and then you go live and you're into a kind of a support phase thereafter. Okay, so the question here is, just have you been through a website project? What are the key challenges? I'm going to come to Lucy in a minute, but I'll go to Sandra first. Have you been through a website project, Sandra?
I have. I've been through a few in various roles. And I think what kind of stood out to me is really kind of making sure that you get the goals right from the very beginning, and you kind of think through the functionality and the usability of it from the beginning, and really agree on that, as well as the kind of key messages and kind of the look and feel that you want it to have, and kind of just lock that in. Because like you mentioned, there's a lot of potential for kind of back and forth, and kind of that process taking, like months or years longer than it should. Obviously, depending on the organization and the complexity of the approval process and things like that. And just kind of making sure that, for example, if you've got a CMS and you want to be able to update content or kind of change things around, that you choose the right CMS to do that, so that the people that will be using it, like if it's like, marketing websites and people want to upload blogs, for example, that's relatively easy. And you don't use something that's super complex where you need to get someone in to kind of, update everything basically. Or just making sure that, the links to databases and things like that, if you've got a kind of e-commerce website or like a sales lead generation website, to make sure that kind of all plugs in a way that's relatively easy to use, and then just lock it in, make sure that you've got the messaging right, make sure you've got kind of the right look and feel, and don't keep like changing your mind halfway through, I reckon, to keep it as short and snappy and painless for everyone, I guess.
Yeah, there's lots of really good advice in there, Sandra. Thank you. Particularly the stuff about the content management system, making sure that it's going to be easy for you to, as marketers, we want to be uploading hub content, blog content, and making changes. So that's a really good point. Lucy, what was your experience then? You mentioned you've just been.
Yeah, so for us, it was a little bit of a challenge, because our industry historically, we only provided carpooling. So it effectively allowed employees of organisations to be able to share a vehicle together into work. But obviously with COVID and everything that's happened with that, the government guidelines were very strict on people aren't able to carpool. So we have to have a way around that, because part of our technology now, we're able to promote active travel. So people are able to now walk or cycle and verify their journeys through our app. So we're very, very conscious that the messages that we want to portray are meeting the right people at the right time effectively, because eventually car sharing, carpooling will come back into our everyday lives. But at the moment, our focus very much so has to be around active travel and encouraging those to walk and cycle. So for me, I mean, I wasn't too involved in the content side of things, but for me, it was just really, really important above everything to make sure that we have the walking and cycling and the active travel, and that message was conveyed ahead of the carpooling, which has always been effectively our bread and butter. So it was a bit of a turn on itself really in this scenario, and it made it a little bit tricky, but I think we got there in the end, although I do think it could be better and improved on, definitely.
Yeah, I think if you need to make rapid changes to your business, like clearly you have, then you typically would want to reflect it on your website, but it's not always that easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can understand. I'm going to leave Neil to the end, because Neil's just started this process with Mint Twist. So I'll leave him to the end, but let's come to Danny.
Yeah, I've been through the process a couple of times over the last 6 or 7 years of getting a new website built, and we are in that process actually again. It's just taking a little bit longer than we'd like. Our current website is through WordPress, which brings pros and cons. Pros being that it's quite user-friendly, but it's a bit like playing with Lego. There's kind of like, you chuck patterns and sections in here and there, but it's not that you can't really manipulate it as much as you'd like. And yeah, that's the downside of how user-friendly it is. In our work at the moment, we've been looking at doing a bit of competitor research and seeing what other things look good and work well, what things that we really don't like about our current website. For me, I find there's a lot of just useless pages, middleman pages, maybe a parent page that, I guess when you're going back to that sitemap, you're trying to work out what here is actually necessary and what can be eliminated, what can help the customer get from A to B a little bit quicker. And it's surprising out there, other universities and other kind of education providers that, especially the older ones, there's so many unnecessary pages and so much there that that's certainly a consideration for us. And also and photography is a big issue as well. We have a lot of photography on our website, and there's a kind of need sometimes to try and have a variation of it, and also just having a good library bank on the back end, because a lot of that imagery might be repurposed in different places. And then also thinking about the weight of all of that video and imagery on the website as well. And you notice that with the load times on some people's home pages, where it doesn't settle for like 3 or 4 seconds, which is automatically a really bad user experience.
Yeah, look, thanks, Danny. There were loads of really good points. The last one you just mentioned there, that is a bit of a classic. I've seen some websites, and no doubt you're one of them, being a film school, that incorporate a lot of video. There are definitely ways to optimize that stuff by using video streaming servers. Even if you can use YouTube, but if you want to use a branded version, there are options out there, and they're pretty low cost now. Because you're right, the impact on load time has a massive experience on user experience, but also importantly on SEO, really negative. The other thing you mentioned that's really interesting is that there are some websites out there that have just grown so big that actually they need a rationalization in terms of, we worked. Sorry, I beg your pardon. We worked with a big university on a similar process and identified, I think they had 20,000 pages, and we identified 10,000 that were just scheduled for deletion. No one was using them, and they just have a negative. They spread the SEO juice out, so they stop other pages from ranking as high as they could otherwise sort of do so. So that's a really good point as well. Let's come to Daisy.
Unmute myself. I haven't done that much, but recently, we've been trying to improve the website a bit. And I guess the challenge we found is we didn't know how far Shopify could stretch with various things. There's quite a lot of back and forth with our website designers and the marketing team, because we'd say, can we do this, this, this? And they'd be like, well, you could do this, but Shopify, can't do this, etc. So there was slight back and forth with things like that. But a big thing for us was looking at how to make our website more, the usability of it kind of similar to what Danny was saying. So make it easier to work through the website and find what you need, but also because we're a startup, so for people to understand what we do, that we've got cafes but also sell flakes online and sell the hot chocolate makers, etc. And basically how to get from A to B easily. And we did some competitor analysis as well and looked at what websites worked well, what drop down menus worked well, how they categorized it without having huge categories which you have to search through and takes ages to find things, so which really helped us improve it basically.
That's good. And how do you find the Shopify back end? Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I getting more used to it now. It's difficult at first, and there's some parts which are just an absolute pain. But now, now getting used to it and understand it a lot more. Good,
thank you. All right, let's come to Neil.
Well, we're going through the pain right at the minute, because our website, I think it's probably fair to say, it's not really fit for purpose. There's a lot of things on especially on our homepage, that you would think would link you to somewhere else if you clicked on it, but it's basically just text. So the usability, I mean, I think Danny said it first of all, is getting to A to B as quickly as possible. And I think that's our biggest challenge. But it's also then because our industry is so fast paced, is what does the client want to hear about? So there's absolute concrete foundations that they'll definitely want, and that's what we've got to concentrate on. And then there'll be, we're going through it in a minute, COVID's quite a big thing, so why haven't we got even what we can do with certain suppliers and certain clients with COVID, and how we can help them with their supply. So our website is literally, we're going basically right back down to the brass tacks of this, and say, right, what is our message first and foremost, and how do we get that across in the most efficient way possible? Because we've got a lot of pages, but I think you just said it there earlier, that one client's got 20,000 pages, 10,000 of them are going to get deleted. Well, I would say probably about well over half of our pages probably aren't even looked at, because they're not really that relevant. They're relevant to the industry, but they're not relevant to the people looking at the website.
It's a really good point. It's just remembering who that user is, isn't it?
That's it. We've kind of tried to be jack of all trades rather than concentrating exactly what it is that we do, and being good at what we do rather than try and spread ourselves too thinly.
Yeah, wise words. Right, let's move into the next phase. So we've spoken about the process of website planning. Let me just, before we talk about conversion rates and measuring websites, let's just talk quickly about sort of the mobile aspect. So again, just give me a show of hands if you are familiar with what responsive design means, what we mean by that. Okay, so responsive design, it's been around for a while now. The idea here is that when you design a website, you design it so that it will automatically rearrange itself based on how the user moves the screen around. Yeah, and the reason for doing that is so that you can create a version of the website that will be as effective as it can be in terms of how well you design it to work on a mobile screen as it will on a larger screen. And so what this really means is that, when Client Farmer's new website comes up, it might have a home banner, It might have some news links to news articles down the side. It might have some embedded links to case studies, and it would have a bit of text and then an image and then a bit more text. As you, if you opened that website on your browser, it would show you all of that stuff. But if you opened the website on your mobile device, it's going to show you, it's going to lose the news articles, or the news articles skip right down to the bottom below the fold. And it's just got the primary headline, the primary image, and the opening paragraph. And they're expanded in size so that when you're on that mobile device, it's easier to interact with them. Yeah. And the reason for doing that is so that your website is more effective depending on the screen on which the user is engaging with that website. So the term responsive means the website code itself is responding to the size of the screen in which it's being rendered on. So from a practical perspective, that design phase that we just spoke about and the associated programming phase, you would actually design two different versions of the homepage of the website. They both got exactly the same content, but in the mobile version, the content's rearranged so that the most important bits remain, and the bits that are less important, like the link to the associated news articles, they're still there, but they're further down and you scroll down to engage them. And so responsive design requires a bit of extra work in design and a bit of extra work in programming, because you're actually programming two versions of that, end screen. And the code, once it's worked out which size screen it's being rendered on, will pull down the associated relevant presentation layer called it is HTML code still. Yeah. So responsive design is, and here's two examples. This Salesforce website, it's just got the key headline and the key call to action or call to actions. You can phone them up, you can watch demos, or you can start a free trial. Those will be the three primary actions that Salesforce want us to take. And if you read the Guardian newspaper website, on your laptop device or your PC, you will get wider information. You'll get a lot of things, columns down the side with supplementary information. If you're looking at the mobile device, it will simply reorganize that page so that it's just the primary headline will be at the top. You always get this little feature where you get the three different lines. So instead of having a big long menu, which wouldn't fit on a mobile device, you've got the three lines, and we all intuitively know how to engage with that. So that's responsive design. And then, and then we're all familiar with mobile applications. So mobile applications, or native apps, native meaning they're native to the mobile operating system on which we're working. If you've got an iPhone, it's Apple iOS. If you've got a regular phone, that's most phones will run on the Google operating system. So Android, they're two different operating systems. And when you create a mobile app, you're creating some program code that we as users would download from the App Store, Apple Store for iPhone, Android Store for a Google phone, and there are Microsoft phones out there that are supporting Nokia devices. And we're downloading some program code, physically onto our device. In the previous example, when we're talking about a responsive website, we're not downloading software, so to speak. We're just interfacing with the internet with a mobile browser, but it's still just a browser, essentially the same as Internet Explorer or Firefox or Google Chrome, or whatever we're using on a laptop. So from a strategic point of view, then let's talk about the functional differences so that we can understand the strategic differences. So first of all, if we talk about native apps, they're not platform independent. So the platform, meaning the operating system, I have to create an app for an iPhone, but then I would have to create a second app that's materially different in terms of programming, even though it would do the same thing. I would have to program in a different language with a different program set to get it onto the Android Google Store, and that would be different from the App Store. If we're talking about a mobile responsive setup, then there's no difference. It's a browser. A browser knows how to read a website. It's a responsive website, so it's going to render correctly for a mobile device. So the benefit of doing the extra work of programming an app is that you can have a richer experience. So you can draw down on the capabilities that the mobile device has. So a mobile device has geolocation. Mobile device, we all have photos on it and videos, so we can access those photos and videos quite directly. Mobile devices these days will know, how potentially how high you are, where we can have access to the camera, of course. So you can have a richer experience. You can create more features typically inside an app. A lot of brands that develop apps, there's this thing about all consumers. What's the product that we own in our lives that's most valuable to us? Historically, people used to speak about cars. I think some research came out a few years ago that said, our mobile phones are essentially our most valued product. And so if you're a brand and you can be physically on the phone, with your icon, on someone's phone, then that's a really great touch point from a brand perspective. Having said that, the mobile responsive sites, can also, if we've designed them very well and people are engaging with our blog content, for example, on the mobile devices, then we can also have that touch point. Easily publishable. So with a website, if you make changes to a website and you upload it to your server, it's basically live. With an app, you're relying on people to download the updates to your app. Just remember what I put in the next slide. Okay, before I move on then, so the reason why ASOS, Amazon, and a lot of the other really big e-commerce platforms, the reason why they have mobile apps is that if you've got an app on someone's phone, and that app is well designed, the average value per customer that's pushed from an e-commerce perspective through the app will be higher than if you didn't have an app and you relied on them to be mobile responsive. And the reason for that is the well-designed apps can draw down on those rich experiences. So you can have push notifications, you can send people offers, you can maintain state more easily in an app. So if you've got an app and you're not logged in, but you go back to the app, the state of that app is maintained. It's easier to do that inside an app, so you can get richer experiences. If you're not an e-commerce brand and you're thinking you want to make an app, I would just say, think about what is the strategic benefit for creating an app over having a responsive website. And so that if you're not an e-commerce brand, if you're not an e-commerce organization, you kind of need a good reason to create an app, and it's probably not just a reproduction of what you're doing on your website. So examples might be, a customer service portal. There are companies out there that build apps dedicated specifically to customer service. If you've got really high value customers, and an app is a useful way of providing some sort of service that's above and beyond what you're doing on your website, then it makes sense. Obviously, the social media apps, they're making use of the rich experiences that apps can deliver, access to photos and data that's on your phone. They will make use of it. Okay, well, we'll get into a discussion where we can come back to apps and other things. But before we do that, I just wanted to share a few more bits of information so we can get into a fuller discussion rather than talking about mobile now. So conversion rates. So before we go into this slide, let me just sort of give an introduction here. So if you talk about a marketing website, at the very highest level, you can say, how valuable is that website? And in order to answer that question, marketing website we're talking about here, and in order to answer that question, you might want to talk about something called conversion rate. And again, conversion rate can mean lots of different things depending on the context we're talking about. But in this context, we're saying, how good is that website at doing whatever its primary objective or possibly primary objectives, are, and if we're Neil or Lucy, we're talking about how many inquiries are coming through that website. If you're Danny, we're talking about how many students we've got applying. If you're Daisy, we're talking about how much, what's the average value, or how many new customers, or depending on what their KPI is, it will be something to do with how much they're selling, through the site. Sandra will be, lead generating inquiries. But obviously all of those numbers, we know that and obviously this digital marketing course, we're going to be talking about how you can send people to the site. So those numbers by themselves, in terms of, quantities. So if Neil said, oh, we got 30 inquiries, it's brilliant. But it's only really makes sense if you talk about it as a percentage of how many people are getting to the site in the first place, if that makes sense. So the rate in terms of what impact the website can have, because when we spoke last week, we said the website is no good at finding suspects and creating awareness, because once they're on the website, they're already aware of you. But the website's job, if we're saying the website's job is to convert people who come to the website to take that primary action that's relevant to you, then we want to know what rates they convert at. So we might want to express that as a percentage. Okay, so I'm going to get a little bit mathematical here, but bear with me and we'll discuss it in a moment. So let's talk about a B2B website that has 10,000 visits. Let's say like 10,000, right visits. No, there's lots of audience. There's lots of people that reach your website that didn't really mean to get there. But let's assume there's 10,000 qualified visits per year. And then from those 10,000 visits, we know from our CRM, from our customer relationship management system, that we get about 200 qualified leads that come off an inquiry form from the website. And that would mean 200 as a percentage of 10,000 is 2%. So we could talk about our website converting at 2%. If it's an e-commerce website and 500 people make a purchase from 10,000 visits, we might say that's a conversion rate of 5%. In this case, we'll talk about a conversion rate of 2%. If you want to go a bit further, like some B2B companies do, you can say, of all of those qualified sales leads, how many of them actually became an actual customer? And if we're assuming that's 25%, so of the 200 leads, 50 become customers, then that might be a number that we would want to keep track of, might be. If we're really sophisticated, we might even be able to track, depending on how our internal systems are set up, we might be able to track those sales to actual revenue. And and I've seen plenty of companies do this where they just say, look, we'll just use our estimated customer value if that's relevant, if that's feasible for you. And so, by doing that, you could say, you could have a go at giving a rough objective, number in terms of revenue of what the website could produce for you. So in this case, if it's 50 sales and average customers 20,000, it's £1 million of new business per year, which is probably pretty valuable. Valuable website. Great, wonderful. So if you are going to do a website redesign, in the case of a website that looks and feels like this, you would, whatever you do, you want to create nice content, you want to create a nice feel, blah, blah, blah. But actually you also want to make an increase in that number. And so everything that we've spoken about today, and obviously there's much more to this, all of this stuff is all about optimizing our website from a design perspective and from a way we lay it out perspective and from the right messages to the right people, giving them the answers to information that they are actually looking for. If we run that whole process, we can expect to nudge up our conversion rates a little bit from what it was before. So if we'd already benchmarked it at 2%, we might expect it to nudge to 3%. And these numbers I'm giving you are sort of, they're reasonably accurate real world numbers. And what we see is when we go from 2% to 3%, you get a small nudge in conversion rate percentage, gives you quite a big nudge in leads. You get an extra 100 leads. If you convert at the same rate, you've got an extra 25 sales, which actually means a 50% increase in revenue that's generated in this case. So you would go from 1 million to 1.5 million. So that's, sorry for the detail, but it's hopefully a good indication of the value of sort of going through this process. The last bit of information before we drop in for a final, round the table chat is just some of the trends that are in play. Let me minimize this. So, there's lots and lots of design trends, parallax scrolling and, other stuff. But in terms of the functional trends that might have an impact on things like conversion, I mean, there are lots of things, but these are, for me, these are ones that are going to be in play over the next few years. First of all, it's the rise of voice integration. So if you look at this top section here, so voice integration by itself has lots of features, lots of interesting sort of functionality will come out of it, and IoT is Internet of Things, and that's great. But one of the main ways that it's going to have an impact on websites, and also we're going to be talking about search engine optimization next week, is the way people search. So the more and more we start to use our voice to initiate a search, what we'll see is you're going to get longer tail search phrases. So instead of typing pubs near me, we might say, where is the closest pub to me right now? So that's introducing some obviously some more words. It's a more descriptive phase. But why is that relevant to websites? Well, if we're going to be optimized for search that's increasingly motivated by voice activated search, we're going to have to change the way that we mark up our content, and to a certain extent the way that we write our content, so that our hub content or blog content is optimized to catch those increasingly long tail search phrases. And you can see some other examples there. Chatbots, the integration of chatbots, companies have been doing this for a while now. Chatbots can be driven by a manual operator, a person in your company or representing your company, but increasingly chatbots can also be managed by artificial intelligence. So cloud artificial intelligence is getting increasingly effective interpreting a question, drawing down on the database to give a more relevant example. And I think we're going to see that those types of integrations working, increasingly being integrated into websites. And then there's this other thing around dynamic content. So we've seen it for a while now in e-commerce websites, but there's increasing sort of integrations that you can build into websites that that allow us to create a more personal experience for end users. Okay, so the final question, and again, please let's go around the table now, and any insights you want, any thoughts, comments, or questions on anything. But I'd also be interested to hear what you think users in the future will want to see, from your websites. Should we start with Sandra?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think in terms of content for Finn, I think it's probably things like more in-depth blog posts on a variety of topics, and kind of making sure that there's good success stories as well. I think that's something that's really, really important, kind of demonstrating that we don't just talk a big game, but that we also have the results to back it up, and just kind of having a variety of content around that. And one thing that I keep kind of thinking about, about like voice search, I always wonder how long it will take rather for that to be relevant to the B2B space as well. Because personally, if I'm working, I don't tend to use my voice assistant as much as I do online, like in my spare time, I guess. because I'm already kind of in front of my laptop, kind of, it's easy to just type it in rather than like kind of speak to my phone, for example. So that's something that just always makes me wonder. So if you got a 2-in-1 there from me, both answering your question and kind of my thoughts, or what I wonder and what, yeah.
Look,
it's what you think.
It is a good question, and most people, myself included, if you think about voice search, you think, well, yeah, I might have used it a few times as a gimmick, and when I'm driving, to be fair, I've used voice search, and it's worked surprisingly well. But the real issue is when you go down to Gen Z, and obviously we work with a few universities, you see year-on-year trends. We've been watching them for a few years now. They're just going up. So they're into the high double digits of percentage. I think you're getting on. It's surprisingly large amongst Gen Z. So obviously Gen Z, Gen Z are tomorrow's, B2B product and service buyers. So we'll probably find that, as that younger generation start to increasingly use it, the older generations will typically start to follow, and it will just become more and more normalized in terms of behavior. Daisy, have you got any thoughts on any of that, or indeed, do you use voice search? Sorry, you're on mute again.
I did it again. No, we don't use voice search, but we use the dynamic content though, with the you would also like various hot chocolates, and we use that especially because with Canoops we're trying to show that we have this process called Canoopology, which is where you get your hot chocolates, you then get your maker, whichever different type of maker you like, and then you also put ingredients into it. So that you would also really helps us show that process, or get people to look at the different parts of the process as well. But no, we don't use voice integration or chatbots either on it at the moment.
Do you think it's something? So just on voice search, just to clarify, so when I say voice integration, you don't actually have to do anything at the moment. Google, the way that Google, because Cloud AI, if you speak into an Alexa device, it uses, I think it's the Yahoo search engine, or sorry, the Bing search engine. If you use any Android device, it obviously uses the Google search engine. So you don't actually have to do anything. You just have to have the content that matches to more semantic search terms, which invariably come out when people run voice searches. Does that make sense? So it's more a consideration than anything else for how you write the content going forward.
Okay.
But yeah, on the chatbots then, do you think that's something you guys would look at?
I'm sure, yeah. At the moment, we've just got an extensive FAQ list, which seems to work. But I mean, I'm sure as it grows and that it becomes, something we need, then I'm sure. But yeah, at the moment, FAQs and emails seem to do the job.
Yeah, good. If it ain't broke, then that works. Should we come to Neil?
Yeah, chatbots. That's one that is quite a hot topic for ourselves, because we're a global company and we're based in the UK, so we're not 24 hours, 7 days a week available. I was going to ask an open question. Has anyone had any experience of chatbots, and is there any sort of real pitfalls to look out for?
I mean, I can talk about them, but Danny or Lucy, do either of you have?
So we used so not necessarily a chat bot, but we did actually have intercom on our old website before we rebranded to Kinto Join. The difficulty with it is, Neil, is when if you're a small team, because it really, you have to be there in order to answer their question. And I think the guidelines surrounding it was from their initial incoming question or statement, you need to be able to answer it within 30 seconds. Right. So that was really difficult to manage from a small team's perspective, because we didn't have anybody who was solely dedicated to doing that. So if you're on the phone to somebody and an inquiry came in, you can quickly type, but it was quite difficult. We didn't try the automated one though, Elliot. That was something that we didn't do. But I mean, it was good, but you also end up with quite a lot of inquiries that aren't necessarily related to what you want to talk about, which was quite frustrating. But absolutely, I can see the benefit of them. Not sure about a chat box. I haven't had great experience with them personally, where it's all automated, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
I mean, sorry, Neil, go on.
I was going to say, one of the complications that we've got is not just about time zones, it's also about language as well, and potential grammar. If we're dealing with particular parts of the world, their English might not be fantastic. So how does that then relate? And with the industry we're in, because some of the phrases, the names of some of the products, etc., all that can throw all that into the mix. And it's a bit of a conundrum that we're trying to pick our way through at the minute.
Yeah, I think in terms of language and chatbots and AI, it's developing quite quickly. But I think Lucy makes a good point. It's quite easy for it to go a bit wayward if you try and do too much too soon. And I suppose what I'm really saying is multilingual, trying to set up a chatbot to service multilingual conversations at this stage, I probably wouldn't advise. Mm-hmm. So certainly if you're new to chatbots, full stop. The good way, if you want to start it, Daisy mentioned an FAQ. So if you can, and I do think, the automation on chatbots has developed well enough now, so you can have essentially an interactive FAQ, and the automation can take you through, because it's like a tree structure, isn't it? You typically, if you think about most FAQs, returns, shipping questions, refund question, you can group them out logically, and then you can have the frequently asked questions. You can present it as a list. You can say what group is your question in, and then you present the list option, and then they click the relevant one. So it becomes an interactive feature. And then if you do, if you want to avoid having someone manning, intercom or whichever system you're using all the time, then most of them now you can just have, someone's away at the moment, but put your name and your email and press submit, and it just becomes another route to inquiry. Lucy's right. I mean, you'll always get random inquiries, but you will do even with a contact form.
What I would also add to this is this might not apply to all of you, but if it's a case that the user, the customer wants to contact you in a way that isn't just a phone or an email, your Instagram Messenger might even have a benefit to you, and it also doesn't require you to respond immediately like a chatbot on a website would. I think people, when they message you, they're understanding on Instagram that it might take you an hour or two to reply. It's just a thought.
Yeah.
No, it is a really good point that Danny's making there. So you can actually integrate Facebook Messenger, Instagram, same platform, into a site and do it that way as well. And actually with those tools, you can also integrate cloud AI. There's solutions, where you can, for even no money, I think some of them are, there's a system called ChatFuel, which integrates directly with Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger, and you can set it up as an FAQ thing and just put it on your website and it will just run.
Great, thank you.
Danny, have you got any more?
I mean, in terms of the original question about what they want to see on the website, I mean, for us, there is quite a need to get across a lot of information and detail just to be respectful to the price point of the product. So there, we do have an obligation to get into a bit of detail. And I think we also have to be bearing in mind about reflecting our facilities, our layout, because we are at the end of the day a school, we're a location, we have a lot of international customers. So there's a need to try and understand something that they can't see or maybe get to. And location is a big thing for us. We're based in Ealing Studios and a working film studios. So that's something that we try to get across a lot on our website, and we're constantly improving. So we're doing a 360 virtual tour setup at the moment. We're doing a video. We got our student vice president to do a guided, recorded, scripted tour of the school as well. That's now being finalized. So yeah, there are a lot of the considerations for things that we have to make sure are very much present on the website. The only other thing I was also going to add, this won't probably be relevant to you, but it's interesting when we're talking about the chat function, is I'm at the moment heading up a UniBuddy scheme. UniBuddy is essentially when you get your student ambassadors to be representatives of the school and answer inquiries from potential students who maybe don't want to speak to someone in sales. And that will appear on certain pages, and it'll have an icon and a picture of that student, and they will engage and send a message, and hopefully that student will then get back to them within 24 hours to answer their inquiry, which is nice. It's nice that they get to speak to someone that's a little bit more on their level. But I think that might be a bit particular to education.
Yeah, but it's a really cool tactic that's been developing in your sector. I mean, for a long time you've used student ambassadors in open days to walk people around. So now you're bringing that experience online, which is wonderful. Lucy, did we come to you? Do you have anything to add?
No, that's really interesting though, Danny, what you've just mentioned, because so for us, that would effectively apply to the communities that we set up. So we have communities for organisations, and effectively what we could do is we could have ambassadors within those communities that provide support to the users who are actually recording their journeys and connecting with one another. So that's really interesting how you've done that. And have you built that into, is it an app or is it the website that you've done that?
It will be built into the website, and we just have to try and find a way to give an incentive to those ambassadors that are involved. And I think we actually there'll be a back dashboard that will be held off of the website on the UniBuddy site, and you get to actually see the actual engagement, the questions and answers that have happened, and the amount of time that's been spent by each individual person speaking to people. So then we will reward them monetary value depending on the amount of time they've spent, but also reward the people that go that extra mile to give more information, maybe in the form of a gift card or something like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. See, we could do something really similar to that, but what we would need to do is we'd need to do that on the web app, on the app side, rather than the web. So yeah, that's really interesting. And just going back to the original question, Elliot, as far as what our clients would like to see, predominantly, I think a lot more case studies than what we have on there at the moment. As I said earlier, it's proof of concept. It's proof that other organisations have succeeded. So we do need to have more case studies. I think we also need more videos as well. Because it is app-based technology and they're looking at the website effectively, I think we need to incorporate more videos so that the potential clients can actually see how the app works. We have some screenshots on there at the moment, but particularly from a user perspective, I think it'd be useful to have that kind of information on there. And then just in terms of the voice searches in terms of search engine optimization, that is really, really important, because a lot of people are doing that more so now. Search engine optimization is something that we are starting to look at. It's something we're starting to think about, because at the moment our site isn't optimized at all. So I think we absolutely need to think about that now, so that it's built in time, really. So yeah, really kind of, that's been really interesting for me, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I'd like to say thanks to everyone once again. It's really enjoyed it. So thanks so much for your time. If anyone does want to ask me a question, I'll stay online. Happy to stay online for a few minutes. Otherwise, I'll see you all next week.